In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel, on Facebook Live, on the Public Access Facebook page, and will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel after the meeting. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. And so tonight we'll start with public comments. Do we have any public comments from the board this evening?
No.
I have none. None.
All right, I will just comment that Selectman Alonso is not with us this evening. He has a scheduled vacation, and he also had a birthday yesterday as well. So just want to acknowledge that. Also, that the Select Board will not be meeting, just noting it now, Select Board will not be meeting next week on Valentine's Day, and instead we will be meeting on the 28th of the month, which is usually the week that we do not meet. All right, any public comments from the public this evening? Yes.
It's for tall people. Debbie Lincoln, 46 Hemlock Drive. I'm just curious, I know you're really early on in the investigation, but if you find that there's a problem in the course of your investigation, I'm wondering if you are willing to consider a repeal and replace, if that is part of your investigation. I've been told by a legal person who grew up on this lake that this abatement process is, in his opinion, a Band-Aid on a murder. And there is DOR precedent for what he thinks should happen, which is repeal and replace. I'm wondering if that would be considered as part of the process if your investigation finds that there's wrongdoing. Okay, just a question.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other public comments this evening? Mr. Luck, good to see you.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. I'm looking forward to the update from the Select Board on their subcommittee's progress tonight. But in the meantime, I have two major concerns regarding this activity. First, since the town manager is the supervisor of the principal assessor, I feel there is a significant conflict of interest in her being appointed to the team that is investigating the process of the 2023 assessment and making recommendations to the Select Board. No doubt the town manager has an important role to play in the investigation, but not as one of the investigators. Besides the significant impact, besides the significant impacts to our lake residents, the biggest area of concern for the Select Board should be the loss of trust by the residents. The lack of trust is painfully evident in that the lake residents are raising significant funds to hire a lawyer and preparing to go to court before the town's investigation even gets going. Worse, there is no evidence of an effort by either side to work cooperatively to get to the bottom of what happened. This trust issue can only be made worse by having the town employee who is ultimately responsible for the actions of the assessor be the member of this three-person subcommittee. I don't believe any member of the investigation team, including the town manager, want to whitewash this investigation. But why leave any doubt in the residents' minds? This is an opportunity to start to rebuild trust, not promote doubt and suspicion by having the town manager investigate herself. Second, it is clear that the Select Board does not believe this subcommittee needs to comply with open meeting law. Whether open meeting law applies or not, wouldn't it be better to err on the side of totally open and inclusive process? 2 updates a month does not an open process make. Wouldn't using the open meeting process to help restore trust as opposed to further eroding it, as the current behind-the-curtain process is doing? I am not an expert on open meeting law, but I have been through many training sessions and in some cases learned its principles the hard way. To iterate some of the key points, I want to quote from the attorney General's Open Meeting Law Guide, which is on the state website. First, what is a public body? A public body is a multiple member board, commission, committee, or subcommittee within any town, however created, elected, appointed, or otherwise constituted, established to serve a public purpose. Does this effort not describe the investigation team that has been set up by the Select Board? Second, what is the purpose of an open meeting law? Per the website, the purpose of the open meeting law is to ensure transparency in the deliberations on which public policy is based. Because the democratic process depends on the public having knowledge about the considerations underlying governmental action, the open meeting law requires, with some exceptions, that meetings of public bodies be open to the public. Why would this team not want the public to have the knowledge about the details of this process? Also, who should comply with open meeting law? The guidelines say, any multi-member board, commission, committee, or subcommittee, if established to serve a public purpose, is subject to the open meeting law. The law includes any multiple member body created to advise or make recommendations to a public body, such as the...
I will give you another minute, but I just want to...
Oh, I don't even need a whole minute. Thank you very much. Again, this is not the reason this multi-member investigation team was established. Attorney General guideline goes on to say, boards of selectmen are certainly subject to the open meeting law, as are subcommittees of a public bodies, regardless of whether their role is decision-making or advisory. Again, although there may be a technical out for this investigation that allows it not to comply with open meeting law, how does it benefit the town to work to avoid these requirements? Wouldn't complying with open meeting law, especially if it's not technically required, contribute significantly to rebuilding trust as opposed to the further eroding it? In conclusion, I respectfully request that the Select Board revisit the membership, charter, and operating procedures of this subcommittee and make its work more transparent by complying with open meeting law, whether it is legally required or not, and thereby rebuild the trust and support from its residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luck. Do we have any other public comments this evening from the public? Okay. So, let's see. We have a scheduled appointment at 7:15 that we will take at 7:15. We will bump up in the agenda the status update on tax assessment investigation to occur after the public hearing that will start in 3 more minutes. Do we have any other public comments today? Any on Zoom?
No.
All right, seeing none, we will end our public comment period for the evening. Do we have any announcements tonight?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think we had any. All right, and we have not received any communications from other boards or any other members aware of any communications from other boards. All right. Okay, we're going to go to interviews, appointments, reappointments, and resignations, and this is for the APDC. We have an interview with Nathan Lockwood of 91 Main Street for a term to expire this end of this June. Is Nathan with us this evening? Yes, he is. Nathan, would you mind coming forward and identifying your interest in this position and what brings you here today?
Hi, Chairman Jeffries and Select Board. My name's Nathan Lockwood, 91 Main Street. I understand the APDC has an opening, and APDC's been around, I don't know exactly how many years now, but a fair number of years, so we've gotten to see what it does well, the APD bylaw. We've gotten to see how it works well and what areas could use some improvement. And I was actually a part of the planning board that drafted and proposed the original APD bylaw. So I think it's a good opportunity now to strengthen the bylaw by working together with existing members of the APDC and other the Select Board and other committees in town to to kind of reflect on what we've experienced with it and kind of strengthen it so it can serve the town as best it can going forward. Because I do think it plays a real important role, and but it's important to make sure that these things are working as well as they can, and doing as much good while causing as little frustration as possible.
Great. Thank you for that. And to the board, do we have any comments or questions for Mr. Lockwood related to his request?
I don't really have any questions. I just have a comment. I'm thankful that you're stepping up, because I knew that you were part of writing the bylaws and that you have an idea of what you intended with those bylaws. So I'd like to see how you interpret them as opposed to some of the other members of the APDC going forward with applications.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Yeah, I think it should be a good conversation. I think what I've seen is that I think the things that are working well and the frustrating things, I think I see a lot of good intentions on all different sides, but people coming at things from different perspectives. And I hope that being able to bring in some of the original intent to not, use as a bludgeon against one side or as another, but to help facilitate the conversation. I'm
Right.
hoping that'll be a valuable thing too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
For all the reasons that Selectwoman Soroka enumerated, I agree that Mr. Lockwood will make an excellent addition, and thank you for stepping forward to, provide service to the town.
Hey, thanks, Todd.
Yes, thank you. You absolutely preempted several of the things I was going to ask. So I think it's good, because I know you were involved in the drafting of that bylaw, and I think people on the APDC are acting in perfectly good faith, but they may be acting in ways that maybe wasn't intended by the original drafters. And it's pretty rare that you talk about legislative intent. I mean, sometimes that's an exercise in folly, but we have somebody here who drafted the APDC bylaw and was part of forming that intent. And maybe things have drifted from that intent, or enforcement has drifted from that intent. So yes, one of the things I was going to ask you is if you would be involved in maybe tightening up the APDC bylaw where it has invited ambiguity or maybe inconsistent, nobody's acting in bad faith, but inconsistent interpretation or enforcement. Sometimes you realize the holes or the shortcomings of legislation or a bylaw or anything only after it's been interpreted and implemented for a little while. And then you go back and you patch it. So I'm grateful that you're stepping forward, and to the extent you can be involved in productive patching, that would be most welcome. So thank you. Also, it is an interim appointment. Your term would expire June 30th, 2023. Would it be your intent to seek and continue beyond that?
Let's see where things are. My intent would be to see where things are at, and if it's important to stay, and I can do that, I'd likely stay on. If everything's resolved and there's other people that want to step up, let's see how it goes for sure.
Resolved in 4 months? Never.
But just if I may comment on what you were saying, yeah, I mean, anyone who's been involved in town, crafting a bylaw or crafting, legislation for the town or whatever, it's a lot of fun, and it's a really interesting thing to do, but it's so hard and you're never going to get it perfect. So I think what's exciting about this opportunity is that I think the goodwill around everyone, and it's not like stepping into a mess of, I think people are excited to work together to figure it out. And I think that's what makes good bylaws, is when people come together to hash out and, like you said, refine it so it's stronger. Because it's almost, you got to try to get it as right as you can the first time, but you're never going to do it. So you just got to stick with it, kind of thing.
Well, you can't predict every scenario when you're drafting these things. You're drafting them in a vacuum until they start getting interpreted and enforced. So
Totally.
Well, I certainly appreciate you reaching out and stepping forward for this role. I think in this role as a selectman, I try to show every board a lot of deference and not step into their lanes. I think it's often inappropriate. However, I think I have been the most vocal when it comes to the APDC, and quite bluntly, my real concerns about what I believe is governmental overreach and rules and regulations that far exceed the language of the bylaw. So, one of the things that they're undertaking is how to kind of take another look at that bylaw and make sure that the intent more closely mirrors the practice. And I think right now there's quite a cavity of difference between, I think, the intent of the bylaw versus the application of the bylaw in terms of how cumbersome it has become for homeowners in the district and especially to the town. So I am grateful that you've stepped forward as the original architect. You and I had the chance to talk, and I've shared with you that I personally support the idea of the APD existing, but I just have a lot of concerns. So I think that, as one of the original authors, you stepping forward, I think will help create a perspective. Once laws exist and they're there, then they're open for interpretation. And I think this will be a good opportunity to kind of bring that perspective to the table and see if, what direction we want to go in. I don't have any other comments, Nathan. I think, obviously you're a great public citizen, and you've been really committed to our community in different capacities. So thank you for continuing to step forward, and hopefully you can get some work done quickly, and come July the 1st, you can go back to Fort Couch, as I call it. So
What was that?
I said Fort Couch.
Fort Couch. All right. Well, thanks so much, Michael, and thank you, Select Board.
All right, is there a motion to appoint Mr. Lockwood to a term to expire on June the 30th, 2023?
I move to appoint Nathan Lockwood to the Architectural Preservation District Commission for a term set to expire June 30th, 2023.
Second.
Additional discussion, I would just offer that I want to second, which I didn't say earlier, the sentiments about the existing membership. I don't think anyone on the board is a bad person. I've gotten to know Cullen pretty well. I think he's a really outstanding guy. And I know Mr. McGrath is a lifelong committed member of the community. And Mr. Scullen-Bernie as the newest member of the community. Certainly we work with him on the Municipal Building Design Committee, and he's a huge asset. So that's all I have for additional discussion. Any other discussion? As many as are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes 4-0. So please make sure you check in with the town clerk and get sworn in. Also, we've updated our appointment rules in our handbook, so please refer to those for guidance.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. So the time is now, that went a little longer. The time is now 7:22, 7:21. We're going to begin tonight's public hearing, and this is a public hearing for a transfer of an all alcohol license for a retail package store license located at 1353 Mass Ave, and transferring to Pura Inc., doing business as Jack Country Variety. So we have will the applicants please come forward? All right. Are you the applicant or representation for the applicant?
Representation.
Okay.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Esposito, I'm here on behalf of Priya Inc. and Priti Patel, who is the manager of the applicant
Okay.
and owner.
All right. So generally what we ask for is for you to first kind of just go over what your plans are, what you're looking to do. We normally like to speak to the applicant. Although you're here as counsel, you certainly can represent, but we do prefer to speak to the applicant on what the plans are, what the intents are with the business.
So basically, the intention is to operate the business essentially as is. The idea is that the license pending, with approval would be transferred, and the operations would essentially continue seamlessly. Ms. Patel has the TIPS training for holding a license in the off-premise alcohol sales. They will continue to sell the same types of packaged food as are currently offered there. And the intention is to continue the business essentially unchanged.
Okay. We're going to start with some questions from members of the board.
Okay.
Just to be clear, this was just a sale of the business to a new person? Is that what
yeah.
happened?
Yes.
Okay. And you just want to keep it as Jack's?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Any questions, comments?
I have no questions. This seems pretty straightforward.
Yep.
And, yeah, no, I support the application.
Just one question, and sorry if I zoned for 15 seconds or so, but have you ever been involved, has your client ever been involved or owned a business with an alcohol license before?
No.
No.
Okay. That was all.
Okay. I have a series of questions. So I'm, when it comes to alcohol, I'm probably the most rigid, because yeah. So my first question is, Mr. Franco just asked if you've ever owned a business in this area, and the answer to that question is no. Have you ever served alcohol to anyone in a restaurant or any other type of setting, or served
I
alcohol?
worked before my father's store, beer and wine.
Beer and wine? Okay. All right, so what is your alcohol control plan? Do you have a plan for how you're going to, you said that you're tips trained, but what's the plan for your staff?
How will you make sure that you're keeping track of the alcohol and only selling it to people who you're allowed to sell it to?
It's like not illegally.
I apologize. Ms. Patel's English is not perfect.
That's
How do you make sure that you only sell it to people who can buy it legally?
make sure I'm not under 21 age, and then no third party.
No third parties?
Okay. I think that that answer is not satisfactory, quite obviously, right? So, certainly we want to promote residents having businesses in town. I'm a little concerned that we don't have a pretty clear articulation from you or your client about what you're going to do to control the sale of alcohol. So do you want to give this a second go?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that all of the systems that are already in place can be, there's going to be a handover process with a longtime owner, a person who's been running the store without incident. And my expectation would be that those systems that have already been set up and are already working would be continued under new management with the guidance of, the prior ownership.
Is your plan to retain all the staff?
You keep the same employees?
I will not think right now, but because I still not meet the employees over there. So I don't know.
So she hasn't yet met the employees, so she can't say for sure whether she would intend to keep them or not.
Okay, so you haven't met the employees, you don't know if you're going to keep them, but you're trusting that the system that they've been using is going to carry over to the business that you're purchasing. I don't want to be difficult. I'm not buying that. Okay, again, I'm trying to be respectful and polite here, but I'm not buying
I
that.
understand that. Is the owner here?
Yeah.
If you,
Is it okay? Is it okay if he?
No, at this
No?
point, we're
Okay.
talking to the
Okay.
applicant, the person who's looking to
Okay.
open and sell
fair.
alcohol in town. So I think that what would be advisable is, I think that you may want to take another week here, and we're not meeting for 2 more weeks, so this is 2 weeks delay. But I would encourage you to come up with a plan for what you're going to do to control the sale of alcohol in your establishment. I think a reasonable expectation or standard that most businesses employ is by requiring all of your employees to be tip certified, ensuring that no one inside of the business can sell alcohol that's 21, having some form of a policy in which you're carding everybody who appears to be under the age of 30, or you might go with a higher age such as 40, that those are typically pretty common controls. And then also posting some signage. I know there's already existing signage, but making sure that there's existing signage related to that effect. As far as ownership of the business is concerned, so in the documents that have been provided in terms of how this business was funded, is the prior owner expected to retain some form of ownership in this business?
Ownership, no. There would be basically essentially a lien on the assets
Yep.
to ensure that the payments are going to be made as required under the purchase and sale agreement.
Okay. So the business has functioned. We haven't had, in recent memory, any issues with the sale of alcohol. It's a new license for this location anyway, but we haven't had any issues with them. They also have a liquor license located here in the center of town. I think there was a issue that came up a couple years back, but certainly they've been an outstanding business owner in terms of being able to have adequate controls in their businesses. I would advise more closely working with them to implement those controls, to know what they are, and to have them in place for us. So I'm going to urge my colleagues to postpone this public hearing for 2 more weeks and to pick it back up on the 21st, and at that time for you to present the information that's been requested.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, I'm going to make the motion. I move to, is the phraseology?
Continue the hearing.
Continue. I move to continue the public hearing at 7:15 on February the 21st.
Second.
Any additional discussion? As many as are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no.
No?
So we got to keep working this then. So pause for a second. So let's talk amongst ourselves.
Okay, I agree with you entirely. I wasn't getting the warm and fuzzy. As long as I want to see some sort of a plan, and that's where I was going with my initial question. Just because somebody hasn't previously run a business with a liquor license, that's obviously not a problem in and of itself.
Correct.
Otherwise, nobody could get into the business. But Mr. Jeffries asked all the right probing questions as far as I'm concerned, and I do want to see a continuity, that there's going to be some sort of assurance that the measures that were in place as the previous owner has run the business, that those are going to continue.
So to
My own feelings are that the chair is being completely unreasonable in his, due to his bias against alcohol, his admitted bias against alcohol. We're not talking about rocket surgery here. We're talking about checking someone's license to make sure that they're over the age of 21. A simple policy would be, I just check everybody's license when they come in to buy alcohol. But if the applicant doesn't object to the continuance, then I will acquiesce and let them come back in 2 weeks with a plan of your choosing. I just think it's unnecessary.
I feel the same as Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you. Are you open to coming back on the 21st?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, will you vote for a continuance?
Yes.
All right, I will make the same motion again. I move to continue the public hearing to February the 21st at 7:15 PM.
Second.
Any additional discussion? As many as are in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion passes. So we will
Thank you,
meet
sir.
with you on the 21st.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to go to old business status update on tax assessment investigation.
Is there a report in here that I'm missing? Do we have a copy of that in our folder?
We just revised it, and so.
It's in the, I just put it
It's in
in.
the drive now. So before I read this, I will say we made revisions on this up until, I think, 6:52 this evening because of additional information that we received today. All right, so we are going to provide a status update on the tax assessment investigation. Fiscal year 2023, which began on July the 1st, 2022, and ends on June the 30th, 2023.
It's hard to hear, really hard.
Sure. I will speak a little louder.
Thank you so much, Michael.
And also, Mr. Jeffers, would you like me to read the letter? Or do you want? Okay.
All right. Fiscal year 2023. Sounds like my mic got turned up too. Fiscal year 2023, which began on July the 1st, 2022, and ends on June the 30th, 2023, is in many ways an ordinary budgetary year for the town of Lunenburg. To meet the needs of the community, town meeting voters approved a budget that increases at a rate similar to previous years, 2.5% plus new growth and excluded debt. For fiscal year 2023, the town's budget is $50,144,851.65, of which $28,618,106.43 is to be raised and appropriated from residential property owners. In Lunenburg, the principal assessor and board of assessors are tasked with identifying the fair cash valuation of all the estates subject to taxation within the town. Massachusetts' Department of Revenue, DOR, is the regulatory authority for the property valuation and assessment process and provides rules and guidelines for how municipalities are to assess the values of properties within their communities. The focus of the Select Board's investigation is to understand how property values for fiscal year 2023 were achieved. What we have learned thus far is that the town's principal assessor and board of assessors were qualified to perform and certify assessments for fiscal year 2023 as per Mass DOR requirements. The principal assessor and 2 members of the board of assessors have their required trainings completed at the time that assessments were finalized and submitted to Mass DOR in December of 2022. 1 member of the Board of Assessors does not have her coursework completed, but based on regulations in place at the time of appointment, she is afforded 2 years to complete the training and is still within that timeline. A CAMA system is a computer-assisted mass appraisal system. Lunenburg previously used the state CAMA system through fiscal year 2020 when that system was taken offline. Starting in fiscal year 21, we switched over to Vision CAMA and continue to use that as our software system that assists with tax assessments. The principal assessor has confirmed receiving specialized training in Vision CAMA and reports over 7 years of experience working directly with Vision CAMA. Throughout the year, there are submissions to Mass DOR that occur, and Mass DOR has confirmed that they interacted with the town's principal assessor routinely throughout the process, as they do with most communities. All sales data submitted was accepted by Mass DOR, and valuations submitted were within their guidelines. In Lunenburg, all residential properties are placed into 5 indexes for the purpose of assessment. To briefly summarize, the average property is an Index 3. Neighborhoods along major roads, at major intersections, and those with a typically lower sales value compared to the average are placed in Index 4 or 5. Neighborhoods that are more appealing on the market and that generally have higher values are placed in Index 1 or 2. All property directly adjacent to Hickory Hills, Lake Whalum, and Lake Shirley are identified as the most appealing on the market and are in Index 1, and includes approximately 434 single-family homes. The valuation and assessment process does not consider impact on property owners. How much someone's taxes increases by from one year to another is simply not considered in the process. Mass DOR's regulatory goal is for all homes to be brought to 100% of the market value during annual valuations, but they allow for a range of 90 to 110% of the market value. The assessment process is a mathematical and statistical exercise that is part science and part art, and it considers a variety of variables to make qualified estimates on what a property is worth. Using qualified sales data that was reviewed and accepted by Mass DOR, it was identified that properties in Index 1 had a notably low assessment to sales ratio. The data identified that the average home adjacent to those 3 lakes had an assessment that was 48.47% of the sale price. The assessment process brought homes in Index 1 to 92% of the assumed market value, which for many resulted in a significant increase in valuation. Mass DOR does not provide an audit service for municipalities, so we are actively soliciting proposals to hire independent tax assessors with experience working for municipalities to perform a thorough review of the assessment process that was undertaken by the principal assessor. This will allow us to have unbiased feedback on the quality of the sales data utilized and the calculations employed across all indexes to achieve property values. Every 5 years, the town goes through a detailed assessment of all properties. For our town, this will occur this calendar year in preparation for fiscal year 2024. Calculations that occur in the 4 years between comprehensive reviews are data-driven exercises and are not personalized to any property. It's a review of neighborhoods, home types, and a variety of other factors. The Board of Assessors has received approximately 420 abatement applications for fiscal year 2023, and we intend to use available data in our investigation to quantify the difference between actual values assessed and values identified after the abatement process. As part of the investigation process, we have been logging all questions from residents that we receive, and we will continue to attempt to provide updates and answers twice a month. The investigative process that we've laid out is occurring in phases. The pre-investigative phase identified the 10 core questions we are seeking to answer and the rules we're following. The current phase of the investigation is the data collection phase, in which we are procuring a variety of documentation and data and conducting interviews. The next phase is the analysis phase, in which we will purpose to establish facts supported by the evidence that we collect. The timeline of this independent investigation will be determined by the availability of outside support, our ability to conduct thorough interviews, and the quality of data we receive. We are committed to providing an investigative summary as required by the town charter, and will additionally provide our full investigative report, including all exhibits, when the investigation concludes. We want to be thorough and complete in the information that we provide, and will provide another update on February the 21st. I will opine that a couple, really just two things I will offer some additional commentary on. So the first area is, there was a question that was raised earlier today about open meeting law. And I believe that we are complying with open meeting law. However, I will note something that, just the reality of doing an interview. When you're conducting an interview, as we've conducted interviews with several people thus far, when you're conducting an interview, there's a human aspect to this. And the human aspect is, if you're talking with one person, or if two people are talking with one person, you can usually get pretty honest feedback. If you're talking and you have 50 or 100 people there, it is a very different feeling in terms of the person who we're interviewing. I believe that what's important is to collect information and to get that information as directly and as bluntly as we can get it. And I am very hesitant to do anything that will affect that. I do believe that if some of the conversations that we've already had, that if we were doing them over Zoom with 100 or 100 people there, we would not get the answers that we've received. And there have been a couple of incidents that have come up in which we've conducted interviews, and the interviewee, due to the public comments that are out there, the news stories that exist, that they are only willing to meet with us with certain people with them, whether that be counsel, whether that be PR specialist, whomever, that it is posing a challenge to the investigation. Certainly, I'm not going to discourage anyone from exercising their rights, but simply I am expressing that I am very hesitant to do anything that will compromise the integrity of the investigation. I think that we owe it to everyone to get you all the information that you want. I understand, I get it. I fully understand where the public is coming from in saying, we want to have exposure and be allowed in this process. I hope the public can also understand what I'm saying back, which is that we want to conduct interviews, and doing interviews with more than a handful of people is counterproductive. As someone who is a retired military police officer who's conducted a lot of interviews, that the larger the audience, the worse the information that you get from the particular person you're interviewing is. However, we are providing investigative reports, and all those reports of the questions we ask and the answers that are given, all of those will be made public and will be provided as part of the investigative report. We also purpose to, as we conclude phases of the investigation, to make information that we've gathered public pretty immediately. We don't want there to be lengthy delays between us gathering information and us releasing it, but we also don't want to release any data that we have not verified and confirmed as fully being accurate. That's the only comment. I think I combined both my comments into one. So that's the only other comment that I will offer. I do expect that we will have another interview on the 21st. Not interview, that we'll have another, not expect, we will have another update on the 21st. That update will provide a little more data, not a little more data. We will be releasing some data during that update, and then we also will have we will have more information. I don't want to say a lot, because I don't want to quantify it. We will have more information related to the work that we are doing and the direction that we are going in. So I will also offer as a second commentary that part of this process is a bit historical. One of the things I mentioned in the update was that the state CAMA system from prior to 2022 is now offline, which means that a lot of that data is manual data, and so we have to manually create a lot of this stuff, which is creating, which is obviously not something that we anticipated. So we certainly anticipated being able to export from multiple databases a lot of data, and that has provided a challenge for us as we look prior to 2020. All right.
Can we make comments or ask you some questions?
Singing?
I'm not being on
Yeah, it's a discussion,
because
so
I'm
for
not
the
on
board.
the-
Yep.
I'm just curious what kind of information we're going to be provided with, what kind of information, what real information we'll have at the next meeting, real information.
So at the next meeting, what I expect that we're going to produce is that we will have a document that compares sales data, assessed values for, right now, the document compares 2022 to 2023. We're looking to add previous years to that, and that we will release that document. It does have percentages and differentials on them. So it is by property townwide of every property and what the value change was from 22 to 23 by parcel.
And are you going to include 21 because that was included in the?
The intent is to provide 21. The challenge with 21 is that it's manual data, and so we have to, we have.
21?
Correct.
Oh, the sales in 21 is manual?
The CAMA system in 21 was, I want to make sure I get this correct.
It says 20.
Fiscal year 20, I want to make sure I'm correct on this.
Okay.
So we are having an issue extracting the data from fiscal year 21. It is a little bit more manual. There's some errors in the data, but we are actively working on that.
Wasn't that used in the assessments? 21 and 22, like was
Yeah,
it
you're
20 and
I'm thinking
21?
fiscal year, and you're thinking.
So the
year.
fiscal.
Talking two different
So
things.
the
Yeah.
latest assessment for fiscal year '23, if I'm not mistaken, is based on fiscal year '21 sales data.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Sales
So you-
data.
okay.
So what you're referring to is the assessments from fiscal year '21,
Well, I'm
'22,
looking-
and
I'm one
'23.
at
Is
the-
that correct, Mr.
Correct.
Chair?
Okay.
Correct.
So you
Yes.
have the sales data.
We have the sales data.
Okay.
What we also have is the actual values of every property in town that we've been able to export from our Vision camera system. What we don't have is I'm thinking fiscal years. Fiscal year
Okay.
2021, which was looking at calendar year 2019.
Right,
That
right, okay.
fiscal year 2021 was in a system that is no longer online. So pulling data from that system has presented itself as a challenge. The data does exist, but it's not as easy to get as the data from the last 2 years. So we do not yet have the data from
Okay.
2021.
Okay.
I have a couple comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you
Yes.
for that update. I think seeing this is my first time seeing it. I'm guessing my opinion is probably shared by people watching and people here, is that we're a little underwhelmed because we really didn't learn much at all. We learned that there were 420 abatement applications, and we learned that there's some, what was the phrasing? Assessments are part science and part art, which is a little disconcerting. And that we're in the data collection phase. So I guess my sentiment would be that we're only going to have the patience of the town people for a short period of time till they start to get very frustrated by the process. You had mentioned you're in the data collection phase. Do you have any sort of estimate of when you're going to complete the data collection phase and then move on to the next analysis phase?
Unfortunately, I want to be careful in my answer to this, intentionally careful. There's some data that we are actively in the process of securing that we do not have. It's challenging right now to estimate how much data we're going to ultimately need to get, and how long it's going to take. I think that our overall goal is, we know that the 90-day clock ends in May. And I think our intention has been to make sure we wrap this up before that clock is over and before residents need to pay their fourth quarter tax assessments. However, that's all dependent upon the data. So I want to highlight a couple of things that were mentioned here that maybe were mentioned in passing. So, in our conversation, we had a meeting with Mass DOR. And in that meeting, we met with the Chief of Assessments for the entire Commonwealth. We also met with our local agent, as well as their supervisor, and then there were additional parties in that meeting as well from Mass DOR. I think that the summary of that conversation from Mass DOR, I think Mr. Alonso, who's not here, I don't want to put words in his mouth, Mr. Alonso was grossly underwhelmed by that discussion with them. And again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he was probably, during our check-in afterwards, he was pretty bothered by that discussion. And generally, what Mass DOR provided was that the sales data was accepted by them, that all evaluations were accepted by them, that they are a regulatory agency, and that if they were not going to accept them, if they identified errors previous, it would not have been accepted data. So what that then tells us is that, the focus, as we already know, is heavily dependent upon us, our ability to bring in independent assessors, people who can sit with CJ, meet with him, go through the actual Vision Camera system, look through everything that happened. The state also was pretty clear that they do not provide auditing services, that's not something that they can assist us with in this regard. And I think that we were hoping to hear from Mass DOR different information than what they were able to offer. What they offered was basically I wouldn't say a doubling down, but it was a reconfirmation of the conversations that we had with them in the week immediately between the 10th and the 17th, and the multiple conversations that we had with Mass DOR. It was really a restatement of many of that. What was advised to us was for us to perform a historical analysis.
A follow-up question to that based on those comments. So I take that as the DOR, if they were going to respond to us in terms of the town identifying an error in our data, it would be on our responsibility to identify that error or validate either identify an error or validate it, which is why it's critical to have the third party come in to help review that sales data and the assessments. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
So I think that there has been a hope from the community that there is some mechanism that Mass DOR has to be able to say, hey, why don't we hear this, we mentioned them the amount of abatement applications, and quite frankly, their response was that, to my surprise, their response was that that's not a bad thing. I think that we all would probably disagree that the quantity of abatements is problematic. I think that from their perspective, it's not a bad thing. It allows us to fine-tune the data. They look at it from a very data mathematical perspective. The impact to residents is not their concern. It's just not within their look. They're not concerned about if someone's taxes went up significantly from one year to another. That's not their concern. Their concern is, were our formulas followed, and what they provided to us was that they were.
You also state in the summary that we're in the process of soliciting independent assessors to come in. Can you give us a little more information on where we are in that process of the solicitation?
Sure, I'll happily explain that one. So there's a couple of requests there. I know that there's a lot of interest in being able to We've received, I don't know how many public records requests we've received the town's received in the last couple of weeks, but quite a few. And so, we have been, I wouldn't use, maybe the word is inundated, but many people are exercising their right to request information that's held as public records. Normally, that's a function of the town manager. Obviously, the load is a lot, and so I know that that's something that's being shared. So where we're at in the solicitation process is twofold. So the first part of this is that we've reached out to several companies to identify capacity in terms of who has the capacity to be able to provide this support, especially since we already have an RFP posted for the assessment office, which is a separate solicitation. So that solicitation is out there. We've reached out to different companies to identify who has the capacity, and we've tried to make sure that we phrase this, the scope in a way that would allow us to get responses. We've also started the process of reaching out to surrounding communities who have principal assessors on staff, not ones who subcontract to other companies, but who have someone on staff, and are making offers to them that, that we would like to utilize the services of their assessors, people with, experience in this area who are certified, and also perhaps get their assistance and, provide some compensation in it. So there's two different approaches to try to bring on people, so people in the area who have experience in this field, and then also some of the outside vendors. What we've learned in the process is a couple of things. One thing that's a little negative is that we were advised by MAAO that there are approximately 17 openings statewide for principal assessors, and that there is a shortage of principal assessors. So that is something that has been identified in the process, that there's just not this ready pool out there. And so we've had to really be mindful of that in the sculpting of in the creation of all the RFPs and the scopes.
Thank you. I have no further questions or comments.
Thank you. Other than completely endorsing everything that Selectwoman Stroker and Mr. Dwyer, Selectman Dwyer said, I do have a couple of additional points. One part of the DOR response, with which I do completely agree, and I've been saying it since the beginning, is that yes, in a mathematical sense, and this is a mathematically driven exercise, more abatement applications and more abatement cases is a good thing, because it will result in more granular data, which will make the entire analysis and the comparison between what was assessed and what, if there's whatever that delta may be, if there's a delta, and what the deltas were in individual cases, it will inform that to a much greater and more granular degree. So that's a good thing. And that for example, I mean, I don't expect this to happen necessarily, but if every assessment turned out based on abatement analysis to be correct, then you would have the highest possible degree of confidence in the process that was undertaken. If 90% of them didn't, that would obviously be a very low degree of confidence, but it's just too early to tell, and without a lot of data points, you're not going to inform that process. Secondly, with regard to the 90-day period for the Board of Assessors to conduct the abatement process. So what happens is there's a 90-day window by which, if the Board of Assessors does not render a decision in any particular abatement application, that abatement application is deemed denied. However, I do believe, and we just never, when I was on the Board of Assessors, we never got swamped to this extent, so we never really had the problem of, to my recollection, of butting up against this 90-day window. But I believe the Board of Assessors has the discretion to extend that deadline and not deem the outstanding cases denied. However, that doesn't solve the issue of people with the fourth quarter taxes having an unresolved abatement, knowing what they need to pay for fourth quarter taxes. So there is that very practical and real and painful reality. And this is a small point, and I just want to do a clarification on this, because I actually don't recall myself, but the 2021, it was earlier stated that the 2023 assessments were based on fiscal year 21 sales. I believe.
Calendar year.
Yeah, it's calendar. It's calendar. Okay. Yep. All right. I think that is all. That's all the chicken scratch I can read. So.
Yeah. So, in this process, one thing I would offer is that, we've been doing this now for 3 weeks. So, I mean, it's been 3 weeks. So it takes about a week plus to frame out the investigation, which I know that we shared that with the members of the board, that we were pretty aggressive in making sure that we've had a good plan for how we're going to proceed. What we've come up with, and I've already mentioned this, is we have core questions that we're looking to answer and a series of questions underneath them. I think that many of the questions that we've received from residents are already on our list, or we've added them to our list of questions that need to be answered. On our list, through these 10 questions, we do have answers to about 7 of them. So of the 10 questions, 7 of them are answered. However, I do not have verified information. And so until we verify, we will not provide that information. But certainly, we know more than what we can say because we do not want to give out any bad information. And anything that's said to us, we want to make sure that there's supporting documentation that supports what is said. There's also questions that come up in the process. So, week 1 was planning the investigation, planning out kind of who we thought initially we needed to talk to. And then over the last 2 weeks, we've been combing through the data. I've mentioned some of the challenges with the data. Fiscal year 23 data was pretty easy to produce. Fiscal year 22 data took about a week. It required us to bring in, Vision, reach out to them, get tech support to be able to pull that data off. We had a company that provided service to us for about 20 years. So the quality of records that we have in the building are poor. And I think none of us knew that when we started this process, that the quality of historical data was poor. And so it is notably more time intensive to get the information that we're looking for. So we know that residents are asking for the same stuff. We can't give what we don't have. That's just one of the challenges. The other part of this is, conversations have shifted, and I want to be very clear about this, that we've talked to DOR numerous times over the past month, and their current posture with us is that they will only speak with us with their extra people, and it's because, in their words, they've been inundated with requests. And so when they communicate with us now, what was previously a 1 or 2 person discussion is now a 5-member panel that's going to talk to us, and they are going to cut off any questions or any answers that begin to delve into opinions or assessments, which I think we were looking for a lot of professional assessments, a lot of professional opinions. We were given them for the first couple of weeks, and they have opted to not provide those to us anymore. That is obviously problematic, but that is in their own words, that is their response to being inundated with requests. And so they will now speak to us in that type of format. That is obviously challenging, of how do you get good information, and how do you get to record good information that was previously stated before we were performing interviews that now they just will not provide. So it is challenging. So, I understand, but I think that I know that Tom and I am intentionally not making public statements about my opinion, because I think it's important for me to be neutral and to accept all possible outcomes in this situation. Certainly, I've been very vocal prior to us launching an investigation in my sympathies with residents, with my thoughts about what happened. I think we were all in agreement that something looks amiss here. But now that I am the principal investigator looking into this, it's important for me to be neutral and to say I need to be able to receive information and let the facts lead us where they go. And I think right now, where we've been advised and where we're going is historical.
One of the things that come to mind that I believe you touched on last week is that we've reached out to our state delegation. Can you give us an update on any other communications you had with our state delegations?
Sure. Yeah, so we've had many conversations with our state delegations, and I think, so the frame of those conversations has been, look, there's something going on here in Lunenburg. We need to look into exactly what's going on. But if we find that there's a formula error, that in 1 year, basically, we have this enormous bump for something that was well outside of our control, and if we believe it's going to go back down, that is there a way, because again, we don't know exactly where this area is, what can the state do? What kind of remedy can they provide? Is there anything immediate that they can do for us? And this question was asked back in early January, was what kind of immediate action can the state take to either A, prolong the deadline, push that deadline from February the 1st to March the 1st, what can be done to reopen the entire assessment process, if not allowed by statute, of if they can pass some kind of rule to allow that process. The feedback that we've received pretty firmly has been that the state legislature in particular has no oversight over the assessment process. That the assessment process is a municipal function that's overseen by Department of Revenue and is outside of their purview. That if we identify a structural issue that would affect taxpayers at large, that is something that they believe they can address, but that it will not be a quick response, just the way that the legislature works, that they are not designed to move quickly, that it may be a time-intensive response, but that they are certainly at the ready to champion whatever we identify as the causation of this, and that they will go after that on their side. And that's, I think, what our focus is there could be very well, multiple things that went right here or multiple things that went wrong, right? We could see that there was some calculation mistake, which will be confirmed once we bring in the independent people who do this for a living. I mean, I think I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm not an assessor, right? And so the best thing to do is have people who are in this field, who do this for a living, come in and provide that type of feedback. That's going to be able to catch any kind of internal process error. On the state side, what was referenced was that there are remedies available if there's a problem. We kind of need Mass DOR to be in agreement that there's a problem, and Mass DOR is not in agreement because it's all data driven, and from their perspective, it's just.
So because Mass DOR falls under the executive branch, have we gone above DOR to the governor and reached out to their office to see if we can get any assistance in that way?
So the answer is no, and I will answer that on the why. No, and here's why. We need to go with the specific ask. What is the ask that we're going there with? We understand that assessments, significantly increase for many property owners in Lunenburg, but you also have Mass DOR saying that the assessments were within their guidelines and that the sales data was qualified. That puts us at an impasse there, right? And so we need to go with a very specific ask. I think that there has been a willingness on the part, again, of our delegation to be as supportive as possible. I think that Tom, and Heather and I all feel a sense of urgency on this, that residents are really waiting to get these answers. They want to know. And I know for us, it's working on the weekends. I've had to take time off of my normal job to be able to do this because it's so much time that we have to commit to getting, to doing this and making sure we're doing it in the right way. But ultimately, what we need to be able to identify at the end of this is was there an error? And if so, where that error was. At this point of time, we have not identified what the error is. And so that is what we know there's a lot of smoke, but as far as what the actual issue is, we do not have that pinpointed. And so once we do, then we will be able to rely upon our outside support. So, our goal is to be able to have these independent personnel in here as soon as possible. I think my personal hope is that they're going to be in here before the end of February and get started on that process. As far as, there's another question about timeline. Timeline of investigation varies. And I know that, that was a question that was kind of mentioned earlier. Timeline of investigations varies. I think what we've done in our framework is we've templated out multiple scenarios, 3 different scenarios of what we think the timeline could very well be. There are multiple variables. It is simply too early to put that information out there.
Do you still feel those will fall somewhere within those timelines, those 3 general timelines you had? Or is it still too early to know whether we're going to fall within those scenarios you had laid out previously, or if we're going to need more time?
Yeah, I think the variables are on the front end of that, and so I think we'll have a better idea by the end of February what the timeline will be.
And to remind everyone, those timelines were we would have an answer somewhere between the middle of April towards the end of May. Somewhere within that month and a half timeframe was the original goal to get this done. Am I?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. That.
My only question for you is the assessors. Have we been able to secure any additional assessors to help out?
So when we post, the way that we're required to do a posting, we have to have a post out for 2 weeks.
14 days, okay.
Correct. So an RFP process is a lengthier procurement process. So we cannot, even though this is an urgent issue, we cannot bypass mass law when it comes to procurement. So the first process for the assessors is an RFP process. So there's roughly, I think I may have mentioned this last week, it takes about 6 weeks to write one of these things, and it was quite the momentous task to get this done within about 10 days. And so the RFP was written and it was published. That was a really quick timeline. It needs to be out there for 2 weeks.
And when was it published?
Last week, I believe,
Last
no,
week.
2 weeks ago, a week ago.
So it's due the 13th.
Yeah, so it's due the 13th.
Okay.
So it was posted last
Okay.
week. And then we have until the 13th to get all the bids back. So they'll be
Okay.
coming in the end of,
Okay.
next week or beginning of next week.
Okay.
And then we have to review those, you have to identify who your kind of, in mass law, who your most responsive bidder is, which is like
Yeah.
code for the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
But you have to find who your most responsive bidder is, you have to award the contract, then usually you assume that they're gonna then take a couple of weeks to be able to start working on the process. So best case scenario in an RFP process is about 6 weeks. And so that puts us then on our target timeline of having someone in place to help by the end of the month. Because the dollar value of what we're looking for on the investigative side is lower, it is not an RFP process, it's a direct scope process. And so that scope is prepared. We have to have the scope out there for 2 weeks. And so I think that deadline's going to be at some point, that went out this week, so that's going to be in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then we will be able to make that award toward the end of the month. And the expectation is that, again, we're looking for people who are available right away to be able to come and provide the assistance.
Have you gotten positive responses from prospective bidders that they plan to be responsive to the solicitations?
We got some positive feedback. Well, let's see, our first draft of the RFP, company said, I'm not bidding on that. And so we had to revise, so that way we can make it more appealing to them. And that was done. And there are some companies that have expressed that they just don't have the manpower, and others that have expressed interest. I think that on the investigative side, it should be a little easier to get assistance, because I think the load there is different. We're not asking them to go out and assess 400 something homes and then, support at the ATB and other factors.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I know we've all gotten a lot of emails.
I just wanted to, I was curious about whether anybody has bitten on the RFPs. Myself, I remember even 8 years ago, there always being talk with the at the Board of Assessors and all, that there is an actual crisis in this field. There is a complete girth of people available. Nobody's going into this. They're hard to find in general. So I'm hopefully people will bite and, at least on a temporary basis. But in general, the field, it's getting worse. Towns are, I don't know what they're going to do for assessors in 10 years. But
Yeah, it is challenging. 17 job openings statewide, so it is challenging. Okay, so we have certainly more to do. Between now and the next update, that we will have several more interviews will be completed. We'll have a lot more data will be collected. And then, what I'm also being careful not to do is I'm also being careful in these updates not to make any conclusions. That is 100% not the role of an investigation when you're gathering evidence. That certainly you are making deductions, you're making your own assessments, But as far as providing a conclusive statement, I'm being very careful not to provide any conclusive statements intentionally, because I do not want to give any bad information. I think giving bad information takes away from the credibility of all that we're doing, and the intent here is to be right, I think we owe that to all of our residents who are here and who are at home, that we owe you guys. Residents came here before us 3 weeks ago and said, here's a crisis I'm facing, right? I mean, it was the 10th of January, so 4 weeks ago, about a month ago. And residents came before us and said, here's what we're facing, here's what's going on, can you help us? How can you help us? And, that first week, I know we made a series of phone calls and conferences to try to figure out what all the options were. And once we identified that an investigation was needed to move forward, I think that we're doing the right thing by doing that. Ideally, we want this to be, it would be great if we could wrap this stuff up pretty quickly. One of the challenges is data. We are looking to bring on someone to help us with some of the, I wouldn't say data analysis, but being able to take some of these manual records and put them into a digital format. That's a time-intensive exercise. I think we have over 5,300 property owners in town. And so these are enormous spreadsheets. And it's just a lot of time. But again, our goal is to try to wrap this up. There is a potential that, our timelines could be pushed forward as well. So, any other questions from the board? All right. I will also open to the public for some questions from the public. I may not be able to answer all the questions, but I will certainly log them. Do we have any questions from the public? Mr. Fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Fortune, 50 Hemlock Drive. You made a couple of comments, and I'd just like to reiterate, make sure I got them correctly. You said there were 434 homes that are on waterfront. Is that correct?
That is what I said. However, that's single-family homes. There's actually more parcels than that.
Oh,
I think
good
it's about
point. Okay, so
400
those are single-family homes.
Correct.
All right, thank you. And 420 abatements. So 14 didn't have abatements.
Not all the abatements were from people who live on the lakes.
Okay, but 420 is a lot, no doubt about that.
Correct.
Okay. You said you kept talking about bringing in new assessors. Who will they report to when they get here?
They're going to report directly to the investigative committee, me and Mr. Alonso. And, the investigation is being led, as a reminder. I'm the principal investigator, supported by the vice chair.
Yep.
And Heather certainly is here to be supportive as well. And that's based on the charter, is that it outlines that the select board and town manager, so we wanted to be consistent with the charter.
Okay. So the principal assessor today reports to the Board of Assessors under the supervision of the town manager. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct? Okay. In the end of this investigation, is there any discussion on whether this is the way we should move forward? We've just talked about the lack of assessors that we see out there in the world, et cetera. We got rid of a company a few years ago for whatever reason, but now we've brought somebody in. Now we're having a lot of trouble. Is there any thought in the end? And by the way, we've all gone to the Board of Assessor meeting that happened a couple of weeks ago. I can tell you there's still not a lot of confidence in what we saw there. Is there any discussion, or will there be discussion at the end of this on whether having a principal assessor working for the town is the right thing, or should we go back to hiring a company to do this?
Yeah, that question is not something that I, as a selectman, can answer, because in our process, because we have, we work with the town manager, because we have, we sign all the bills. Every dollar that is expended by the town goes through our hands, literally. And so the role of the assessors is wholly separate from our role. So my understanding of what's come out in this process is that it was the Board of Assessors that expressed some challenges with the previous company. It was their request to go away from that previous company. For some reasons, I want to be mindful that I'm in a public meeting, so I'm
Yep,
have to
that's
be
fine.
careful about what I say. So that decision is up to the Board of Assessors. The Board of Assessors requested to move away from having a company and having a principal assessor on staff. That was their request, and this is what the town has attempted to do to meet those needs. I do think that in the investigation, we're certainly going to make recommendations that are outside of our purview for things that we believe the town needs to do. I know that I've already started writing some recommendations, but some things already stand out to me.
Okay, it seems like a reasonable question to ask again, based on what we're going through now.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And I want to also just offer another comment. Although we have a town manager, and this is something that we've talked about as far as the town manager's role when it comes to the principal assessor, so the way that the town manager's role is structured, we certainly do not have any expectation for the town manager to be able to provide assessments for properties. That is outside of her skill set, and we know it. And so, our expectation is, it's similar to, all jobs technically within town are underneath the purview or underneath the supervision of the town manager. And that's done so that way there's uniformity across the board. This was a change in the charter. And that way is uniformity across the board, that the only board that, there's 2 boards in town that somewhat have employees. And the Conservation Commission is one of them. However, that employee is most certainly selected by the town manager and ratified by this board. The principal assessor is an employee that we do not have any control over their hiring, of the job that they do. We don't ratify that appointment at all. That's ratified by the Board of Assessors. They're the only, to my knowledge, they're the only board that ratifies an appointment. I believe is only the Board of Assessors. Who else?
Sewer.
Sewer commissioners do as well. And that's they're an enterprise commission though. So I hope typical in any job, when, you're performing your duties and there's a question about whether or not your duties were performed satisfactorily, that typically it's your supervisor who would be doing that type of review of whether or not you performed work to the standards that you were expected to, whether or not, I don't personally see a conflict directly with someone's supervisor being part of a team that's looking into whether or not an employee performs standards and tasks to the standard. As a select board member, one thing that we do not have access to is personnel records, that those are private even to us. And so we don't have access to personnel records. The town manager, however, does have awareness of personnel records. We don't have access to whether or not an employee is on a work plan. To my knowledge, certainly CJ is not on a work plan. But we don't have knowledge of those types of things. That's something that the town manager would have knowledge of. So in my view, it is important to have an employee's direct supervisor part of a team. I don't think that the town manager is going to compromise her credibility for a problem that she may identify. I think that we all expect that, just as the town manager certainly isn't going to be able to pull anybody over, on the roads. She's not going to get in a cruiser and enforce the laws, but she hires the chief of police and oversees the police department, as do we. That sometimes you have managers who perform duties that are managerial, and that in our structure aren't necessarily, you need to be capable of doing the job of the person that you're supervising. So, the supervising activities is mostly related to compliance with regulatory expectations. The town manager has the timeline of submissions, just like I do now, of what the principal assessor is supposed to be doing. And so some of that supervision is overseeing that, ensuring that those submissions are occurring in a timely manner like they're supposed to. And then also having that interaction with the Board of Assessors, that, any challenges that they identify, because they're the ones who work pretty directly, in this case with the principal assessor, that any challenges identified by a board, that you have someone on staff who could provide that continuity and who can enforce. Some of the challenges of what happens in elected and appointed boards, and the logic behind why we went away from staff answering directly to boards, is that the normal human reaction when you're doing something for free and are getting frustrated is to be like, why am I still doing this? And so similar to anyone having a job that you don't like, if you don't like your boss as the job, you typically just move on. And so there is a structural issue if you only have employees reporting directly to boards, because in frustration, some board members, myself would probably be one of them, that would just tough it out and be right there. But other members would say, this isn't working for me, I'm just going to move on. And so it does allow us to then have that control, that continuity, and that's really what the role of the town manager is when it comes to the principal assessor. Certainly, it is not to oversee and directly get engaged with exactly what he's doing. That's what the regulatory agency is for.
I agree with many of the points you make, certainly, and we all appreciate the fact that you 4 of the 5 of you up there are volunteers, right? You give your time, you have given significant amounts of time. I know you have personally given a lot of time to this issue. That is not the issue at all. I've also been the vice president of sales, and I can tell you, whether it was my sale that fell through or not, when the company goes in decline, they look to the vice president of sales to lead, and I would expect the same from the town manager as well here to lead. The person she is responsible. I'm sorry. The town manager is responsible for the employee, and all that is done by that person, whether they watch them directly every day or not. So, yeah, it does roll up to the town manager.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
And I think that, as an obvious commentary, right, and I'm going to offer this as an obvious commentary, what's obvious is that the government in some way failed, right? I mean, that's obvious, in my opinion. That is crystal clear. That if there was going, if these assessments were known, which they were, and, there should have been, and this is a commentary not as an investigator, but as a selectman, not that I can separate the two, because I really can't, but kind of pulling on a comment I had made previously, if we are aware that a process is going to have a negative impact on people, we're in the people business. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, I don't think any of us said that we're going to run to be a selectman and be here because we were looking, to do anything for ourselves. It was all about how we can give back to the community. And I think that that's what most people who run for office kind of have, that similar mindset of, how do I give back? And that's, I think, a lot of the motive behind a lot of this. But even in that process, even I think the best intended people, you still have obligations to the people. And I personally just, don't understand why information was not communicated in a more timely manner. I'm not saying that the information was correct, because I don't know that yet. But even if this information was known, I don't have a good answer for you for why the information, when it was known. I think we do now know when it was known, but I don't have a good answer for why it wasn't communicated. And that obviously is problematic. But again, our investigation is not just into the communication aspect of it. That's actually not something we're looking at all yet. That's later down the line. Right now, I think our focus is on the actual data and the accuracy of the actual data. All right. All right. Any other questions, Mr. Lincoln?
Online.
Oh,
There's been someone online. There's someone on there. They had their hand raised the whole time.
all right. We're going to call on Nick next after Mr. Lincoln. And we're just going to take a couple more questions, then we're going to continue with our agenda. Mr. Lincoln.
Hi, guys. Long night?
No, actually, when we don't have a member here, we tend to shorten what's on the topic because we like to have a full board.
Well, Pete Lincoln, 46 Hemlock Drive, and I think I'm a smart guy, too. But it baffles me that the reason we are all here is that the land was so highly assessed, not the houses. So when the assessors come around to look, the land isn't going to change, except for Dave Rogers. The land is
Except
not
for
gonna
who?
Dave Rogers. His land shrunk, but ours hasn't. So what's the point of the assessors coming around and talking to people? The land's going to look the same. It's got snow on it, but it's going to be the same. And our property of 1.3 acres was assessed at $600,000 the first time. This last bill was 1.3 million.
So
It hasn't changed any.
So
what's the point of what can an assessor come around and see that he couldn't take with a drone?
Yeah. So I'm not on the Board of Assessors. I can only answer the question as far as I know it, which is what I've learned from our conversations with Mass DOR and then also speaking with the assessors. As I understand it, the abatement process seeks to evaluate your total property, including your home and your land. That is what the purpose of the valuation is in there. So when you have someone come to your home, that, for example, not letting them in your house could be a reason to deny the request. That they're there to do a full assessment of the value of your property, including your house. That's what they're there to do. It's not just to look at a portion of your property, it's to evaluate your full property. Because at the end of the day, and I hate that phrase because it's been so common lately. But ultimately, the role of the town, our duty is to give owners, and this falls on the Board of Assessors. I say it as a selectman, the town's responsibility through the Board of Assessors is to provide you with a total assessment that is for your property and house that is close to the actual cash value on the market. In order for them to do that, they have to evaluate your full house. Lou, do you want to add anything else to that?
No, I think that's just about right. I think the question is entirely reasonable. I don't think we have a full answer to it at the moment, but you do raise a good point. If it does open up, filing the abatement triggers and opens up an evaluation of the entire property, structures and land. And if you do have the right not to let the assessors in to examine the house or the residence, but they can, if you do that, they won't necessarily deny the abatement, but they will make, they are permitted to make presumptions least favorable to the abatement applicant, in terms of improvements or, in other words, they would err on the side of, they would err in a direction that results in more, not less taxation. They're not going to err in a direction that is more favorable to the abatement applicant if they're not permitted to enter.
But again, we are not on the Board of Assessors.
That's not what he's asking. That was not what he was making a point for. He just is making the point that when an assessor comes and looks at the property is exactly the same as it was when the assessment was made. And that is the point that Mr. Linking is making.
Right.
It has nothing to do with letting anybody in their house.
Right.
Okay? That is not what he was trying to say here. He was
You get an
just trying to
occupancy
point out that
permit.
he's frustrated with this whole process because the property is what was over-assessed according.
The land
Yeah, the
was,
land,
yeah.
the property. The
Not the
land,
home.
not the value of the home.
Yeah.
We get an occupancy permit to our home on the lakefront in 1979, and it has never been assessed since. And I'd be willing to say that most of the people here have not been assessed every 5 years at all. So the likelihood is, with all the work we've done in 45 years, that the house is probably worth a lot more. So if someone comes in to assess our property, it's going to be higher than it is now. No?
I don't know if we on this board can make any evaluations on what's going to happen in the abatement process. We are not assessors. I don't know if, I think Lou's the only one of us that's even taken any of these classes. I'm just not qualified to speak on behalf of the Board of Assessors. But I certainly can make note of your question, Mr. Lincoln, and forward it to them and ask for them to answer it at their next meeting.
It just seems that we're asking to have our the houses valued at more than they're assessed at present. So we're tying another knot in the noose. No? Thank you.
I don't know enough to answer that question, Mr. Lincoln.
Can you get
I will-
information in the next couple of weeks, maybe?
Yeah, I will make sure that we reach out to the Board of Assessors, and I'll personally try to get this question answered for you.
Thank you.
We have someone on Zoom.
I think they're gone.
Nick Vita.
He went away.
Nick.
Nope, I'm still here. Hi,
Oh, there he is. There he is. Okay. Or
can
woman.
you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I'm wondering, is the
Wait, they named their name.
Nick, if you wouldn't mind just stating your name and address for us, please.
Oh, sure, Nicole Waters, Vita is my last maiden name, 80 Horizon Island Road.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So my question is about the investigation of the process. I think that's what you guys are investigating, is the process of these valuations. And my question is, are you guys planning on including, because this is the big question to me, why non-lakefront properties within Lunenburg, excuse me, their valuations seem to not have increased, and if they did, maybe 1 to 3%, where we know that sales values off lake also increased significantly in 2021, as well as lakefront, of course. So I'm wondering if you're including that question in your investigation of the process.
I would say not, that question, not quite directly. However, what we're doing is we are looking at all properties across town, not just properties on lakes, because the implication here is that if someone is being overassessed on their home in any of these lake communities, that means someone else is being underassessed for their homes. So that's what the implication would be. And I mean, and so yes, we have to look at all properties and all indexes across town. You know, the assumption that happened going into fiscal year 2023 was that Lunenburg saw an increase in property values of roughly 23.3%. I know we've mentioned that at a previous meeting, but every owner in Lunenburg saw a 15% increase in either their property or their home values for fiscal year 23. The challenge was that was coupled with an increase in Index 1 specifically that saw a doubling roughly in home values, or property values, excuse me. And so because you had that, even though, if you kind of look at it from the lens of, even though everyone goes up by 15%, that when one group goes up by more than that on a certain aspect, then, you know, they're going to get hit with more taxes. So yes, I would say that there are several questions that have been asked about lakefront, about is lakefront required to be delineated within state guidelines? That's something that we are looking into. How is lakefront defined within the town of Lunenburg? That's something that we are looking into. But we, again, have seen an increase in values across the entire town. It was not just limited. It was just a substantial increase limited in specifically Index 1.
Oh, okay. The few people that I know off lake, because I'm on lake, their feedback was that their taxes, their valuations did not increase. So that was my assumption townwide, which is why I asked the question. So I still think it's probably there, it's out there, I believe. I don't know. You know more than I do, but.
As I've looked at the data, what I've seen is I've seen every home increase in value by 15% in fiscal year 23. I'm not aware of any home that didn't increase. However, what happened was you had a corresponding decrease in the tax rate. And so even though the values may have increased by the tax rate decreasing, that may have resulted in some people seeing an overall decrease. However, the numbers say that an average home saw a $428 increase in property taxes for the year.
Got it. Thanks for answering my question.
All right. Any other questions? Hold on, Mr. Luck. Hold on. I know you came up before. Any other questions from anyone else? Yes. And then just to put this on a time, we're going to do this for 10, 15 more minutes, and we're going to wrap up. Sir.
Alex Yower, 226 Sunset Lane.
Hey, Alex.
Hi. So I want to address the art portion of what you were saying about that, because I read the certification standards, and it seemed pretty apparent in there that the state does recognize that there is a certain amount of interpretation and art involved in these assessments. And my question is the investigation going to look into that aspect of it, or just look at the pure data and say, okay, state guidelines were followed, nothing was done wrong, we're going to move on? Or is they going to dig a little deeper, which I think a more competent, experienced assessor would have done, because I think that's probably their responsibility, and someone that is more experienced knows that they have to do that. and feel it's part of that responsibility to do that. And I'm not sure if CJ did it or he wasn't aware of that was part of the process or not. But is that something that's going to be part of the investigation?
Absolutely. So that phrase that I gave was actually a phrase I quoted from DOR in our meeting with them. That was something that they said to us directly. Absolutely. I think that is 100% what we are looking at, is the art. Because there is a science to this and there is an art to this. I think the update I provided tonight was that the science of this, Mass DOR has confirmed with us that they do not see an error in the science. Now, we need to kind of confirm that ourselves, so there is some confirmation that needs to happen, but it is the confirmation of the process that was undertaken, in this building by our staff, by the town staff who performed it, and that is exactly why it's so important to have experienced municipal assessors come in here, go through our CAMA system, meet with CJ, and go through the process and provide us with their feedback on, one of the critical questions is, was the assessment consistent with professional standards and norms? The only way to answer that question is to have someone who has knows what those professional standards and norms are. Another question is, is it compliant with DOR standards and regulations? And again, the previous question is what we really want to get. We want to get answers to all the questions. But I think the question that's going to be the most impactful to residents is the art side of the equation. Yes.
Okay. And by your comments tonight, I'm a little concerned. Are you going to be able to find enough people or qualified people to do that?
Yeah, I will say, I think that when things like this happen, that what you get what I've learned over these last couple of weeks is that many assessors are, they see many communities in town saw a substantial, or not in town, across the state, did see substantial increases in property values. It was on the cover of the Boston Globe. It's been reported, all over the place. It's happening nationwide. So that 23%, 30%, a lot of people saw that townwide. That didn't happen here because, again, as the explanation that we've been provided is that the sales data saw a concentration of that growth in one index primarily, even though there was growth everywhere. But that in one index, that growth was exponential. It brings a question that's come up in this process about the map that we're using. Is that map detailed enough? Does it have enough granular data in it? There are opinions. I don't want to make any opinions about that, but I'm mentioning these questions because they're questions that we're asking and that we've asked and that we want to get the answers to. Why is Hickory Hills treated the same as Whalum? To me, on the surface, that seems wrong. I mean, Hickory Hills is a private lake. Whalum is not. Hickory Hills has multiple beaches on it that are not open to the public, and Whalum is. One would just naturally assume that a house on Whalum is probably worth a little less than a house on Hickory Hills. And so, that is one of those questions that kind of comes to mind. One thing we've learned is that Hickory Hills is the largest private lake in Massachusetts. I didn't know that 3 weeks ago, but I did learn that recently. So, there's a granularity of data that looking at the maps now, I think that I don't want to offer any opinions or conclusions, but certainly there's a granularity of data that should be there.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any, Mr. Luck, you had a question? And then Carol. Phyllis.
Phyllis Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I thought I heard you say, now you know when it was known?
Correct.
When was that?
I cannot say that yet. And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
So we still need to do, some investigation work.
Yeah, but you know when it was known and you know who knew it.
Correct.
So it seems to me that that's information
Yep.
we should be able to have now.
I do not believe that providing that information today will be helpful to what needs to happen over the next 2 weeks. I do understand that it is important information to have. However, we're doing an investigation at the request of the public that we all agree with doing. I'm not going to compromise our ability to get you guys good answers, and I think that giving that information today will compromise that ability. I'll be in a better position in 2 weeks.
So on the 21st, we will know when it was known and who knew it.
Correct.
All right. And now, another question about the land, every parcel went up by like 136%. Some pieces of property have this huge slope and very little of it is usable. Some pieces are very flat and the whole thing's usable. When the people come out to assess, are they going to have a checklist? You know, all of this is flat and usable, this is on a slope, this is next to a swamp, half of this land is a floodplain, half of it's wetland, we know, everybody knows how big their property is, but all properties are not made alike. Will the people coming out be able to have a checklist, and assess the value of the property?
So the answer to your question, I know you're not going to like it, Phyllis. As a selectman, our role in this has been to make sure we're providing enough support to the assessment office. We do not have anything to do with how homes are assessed.
Lou must know.
It is just not something that
Can Lou answer the question?
If Lou happens to have historical information and can answer that, but I can't give you an answer that's going to be qualified townwide. One thing that we do know is that in the RFP that's been written, it's a requirement for the companies that we hire to coordinate. So that way they're all employing similar methodologies across town, that you're not getting, hey, I got Scott, and so Scott's great. Oh, damn, I got John. John's terrible.
Yep.
We want to make sure that no. I'm just picking names. So that's not, but as far as what the actual process is, I don't personally know. Do you have an insight?
Yeah, I want to actually circle back and try to address some of this very much in the hypothetical, because I don't want to speculate as to how this was done, and also exercising my own opinion to maybe add some edification. Addressing in part Mr. Lincoln's question, in thinking about it and going back after he asked it, the question about this is part science and art, the art aspect of it, and now what you're saying, Mrs. Luck. I want to say what could have happened, and I'm answering this in the hypothetical, is that especially because people haven't been out to assess in so many years, nobody recalls anything, is that when they did the assessment, they sort of took a template. Again, I'm speculating, and then I'm telling you how this could happen. I'm not saying this is how it did happen. They take a template and they say, 0.5 acres on Hickory Hills. 0.5 acres on Hickory Hills is worth X dollars, but it's taking into account none of what you're suggesting right now. And Mr. Rabbit, I believe it was here for the Board of Assessors meeting last Tuesday afternoon. He specifically brought up some of these factors, like how deep is the water in front of my property? How far out? Can I dock a boat? Is part of my land across a road, such as on Townsend Harbor Road, where I have to go across the road and I have a parcel and I have access that way? The points you're talking about, Phyllis, are precipitous slopes. Can it be built on? Wetlands, etc. So people that, I suspect what will happen is once the data gets more granular, people that have these kinds of conditions, the abatement process is going to kind of go in. Again, I'm speculating, I'm telling you what would happen from my recollection, and I'm answering this in the hypothetical. People with these kinds of factors, the abatement process is probably going to go in the direction they like, or that's going to tend to reduce the value. But what may have happened from a 30,000-foot view is that all half-acre properties, all 1 acre properties were evaluated with a sort of a broad template. When that broad template isn't necessarily applicable in every case, it's the abatement process that's going to draw out these distinctions and say whether these assessments are justified or need to be reduced.
So the assessors that come out will sort of have a template of what they're looking for, and they'll write notes?
Well, I would ask them, again, this is me, again, I don't know if they're going to have some sort of a punch list, all right? But certainly anybody applying for abatement should raise these issues if they are real factors and say, well, my half-acre lot, I can't build anymore on it. I can't expand the footprint of my house. I've got 6 inches of water 40 feet out from the shoreline. I can't dock a boat. that makes me different, my 0.5 acre parcel, different than my 6 houses over that has 7 feet of water right off the edge and can expand their property, et cetera. So people that have these factors that they believe detract or reduce the value of their property should certainly make them a part of their abatement case.
Okay, and will we be able to be there when our property's assessed?
Oh, sure. But I mean, that's the way, I went on multiple, if it's carried out the same way assessments, for some sick reason, I went on tons of these site visits on weekends when I was on the Board of Assessors, when people filed abatement applications. So I walked through scores of houses in this town.
And,
But I can't answer that. We can't answer that question today. But I think that that's an important question that needs to be answered.
Yeah, I'm not answering for this process.
Yeah, right.
But generally speaking, if somebody, in the general process of filing an abatement, if the property owner not only has the right to be there, of course, we got walked through houses by the owners.
Great, thank you very much.
Any additional, yes, Carol?
Carol Hatch, 41 Hilltop Lane. I first want to acknowledge that you are volunteers and that you are putting a lot of extra work, and even you, Heather, are putting in extra work, and it's very much appreciated. Having said that, I think you have to be really careful about comparing one lake to another for a couple reasons. One is that whole concept of lakefront being more valuable than other properties is part of what got us in this trouble in the first place. Not everybody wants to live on a lake. Some people want to be secluded. Some people want to be able to have huge footprints. And in terms of comparing the lakes, there's many, many variables that go into it. I can't speak for Lake Shirley or Whalum Lake, but as a board member of Hickory Hills Lake, we deal with a lot of problems. We've got eutrophication, the natural, filling in of the lake. We've got invasive weeds. We've got problems with algae. And we not only do we pay fees to maintain our lake, a lot of volunteer hours go into maintaining that lake. That's not something that necessarily anybody wants to sign on to. Honestly, if the house hadn't been in my family for over 50 years, I'm not sure I'd want to sign into that either. Another thing to take into account in terms of differences, if I just casually say, yeah, I live on a lake in in Lunenburg, which one? Hickory Hills. Oh, that's the bad lake. You can't have speedboats. So there's many, so really value is in the eye of the beholder. And I think it's just really important to keep that in mind. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Carol, for saying that. And I do appreciate that. One comment that was made in our conversations with Mass DOR, and I will share this. One comment that was made was that they generally see across the state that the closer a home is to a lake, the more valuable that home is. I think it's considered, by them at least, to be common knowledge that if you have a home that's sitting on a lake, that your house is more likely more valuable than the house that's not directly on a lake. Now, personally, in this investigation, I'm not here to make evaluations about proximity to lakes. I'm here to get an understanding of what transpired and why it transpired. I think that my commentary, nonetheless, is that if there are differences between the three lakes, that for the purposes of assessment, they're treated the same. And that there are not statistical differences between those lakes. They're all treated the same. However, I think that there may be some problems there. And that's just looking at the data, because when you look at the data and you look at the home values, they're not consistent. That one lake in particular stands out compared to the other two, as home values are generally lower. But they're all treated statistically the same. And so, one of the things that will happen in the year that we're in right now is that during the recertification process, it's a grouping of neighborhoods, that's part of the process. It's a revisiting of the map overall, identifying if that map is still valid, if things have changed over the years. And so you do get differentials. Maybe, for example, my house, which was previously, in a neighborhood where I lived right next door to a broken down barn. I mean, it was so frustrating. And so we're looking at this dilapidated barn for the last 10 years, of living there, and the house that's condemned. And on one other side of me, I also have a condemned house. Well, my neighbor just tore down the condemned house and they built themselves a nice, beautiful home. And as you come out of Townsend Harbor and you get at that stop sign, you can see it across those fields. That house that's getting built, that's next to my house. And what used to be there, again, was so I know what's going to happen to me in 2 more years, that my property values are definitely going to go up. Because we were considered, previous to that, low quality. I think I'm in zone 5, because who wants to live next to property where 2 homes around you are falling down and they're the only ones you can see? So the impact when that changes is that I expect that my values will change as well. So that's going to happen. Again, part of the map process is to do the statistical analysis, to revise these maps, to add more data to there, because as is being noted, that maybe there are some homes that are currently that what's being stated, and I'm just restating the obvious, what's being stated is that, this was kind of a broad swoop that treated a lot of properties the same, and the feedback is that a lot of these properties should not have been treated the same. And so, how do you resolve that? In the immediate time, we're going to figure out what resulted in these assessments. Again, I've given you the information that we have, well, not all of it, but what I have verified. I've given you the verified information that we have, but what the town's going to go through this year is a review of those neighborhood maps. And there will be changes this year to those neighborhood maps. And the data that comes out of the abatement process will be extraordinarily helpful. I know that on the immediate side, and I'm not in the position, and I don't want to sound callous as I say this, I swear a lot, I just had to catch myself there. It sucks. It sucks that instead of us being able to take another look at this, that instead we have to ask, by law, everyone who has a problem with it to submit an abatement application. I mean, that just seems so ridiculous to me from jump. I was really floored when we found out from the state and the Commonwealth that that's just what it is. That if you want to make changes, you got until the end of December, but after the end of December, you got what you got. And that just it just feels like the laws are not designed to favor or to assume that the government is even capable of making an error. That they're designed to say this is what the government has the authority to do, and once it's done, it's done. But if there is a positive in this, the positive is that we will have far more granular, detailed data coming out of these abatements about these neighborhoods, and we should not find ourselves in this position going into next year. That's if there's a positive, that is the positive, is that any home identified now, that there should be some revision to the maps. And one thing that we haven't identified just yet is when that map that we're using was last updated. I don't have the answer to that just yet. It seems to have been in use for quite some time, at least the last 5 years. And that may be, and according to Mass DOR, again, that they kind of expect this. I mean, they have a system that says every 5 years we're actually going to look at properties, that in the interim years we're going to do 10% sampling, but otherwise every 4 years you get a statistical number. And they're, it just, the whole thing, I'm quite honestly, I'm glad I'm not in the session. This stuff seems crazy to me. Some of these rules just seem absolutely not user-friendly, not resident-friendly, and just flat out nuts. But we're combing through it, and we're getting the details, and we're going to get you the answer. Because I think that if anything that we've done so far, I think we have done a very good job, and I'm going to say this any day, of letting you know that we sympathize and we care. That this clearly seems problematic, right? And we clearly want to get to the bottom of it. In that same breath, there is a variety of outcomes. One possibility is certainly that no mistake was made. That is very much so a possibility, which seems like galling to most people, but it is very much so in the realm of probability that no error was made. Another error, another possibility is that an error was made, right, on our side, that there was a calculation mistake and that it just wasn't caught by anybody. That's very well a probability. Another probability is that the maps are so outdated that now we're in the situation that, you know, here we are and we're using old maps that should have been refined over the years. And why didn't that happen? You know, another probability of what could have happened is that properties could have been underassessed. I mean, that's another probability. So, I mean, there's a lot of probabilities of what was wrong, how we all got to this point, and that's what we're trying to figure out as those answers to all those questions. There will be no cover-up. I've made it very clear to everybody. I have zero intention of running for office again. I think I've said that when I first got reelected, that I wasn't planning on running for office again. That this for me is a service and it's a duty. I've served our nation for 20 years. I've given our town 6. I'm hanging it up and I'm going to be done. But what I'm giving you is I'm giving you my time and attention, and I'm giving you all that I have, and I am giving it willingly, because this is the right thing to do. This is why I signed up and said I want to be in this role, is I want to be helpful to our community. I understand that we all have a variety of skill sets, you know, but no one's taking any shortcuts here. We're here to do the right thing, because right is right. No matter how much pressure there is, no matter how many people are screaming at our doors or banging them down, right is right, and it doesn't change. It just is what it is. Any other questions tonight? I'll get off my soapbox. Any other questions tonight? Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I just make one more further comment?
Yes.
I would say that one other possible outcome is that's within the realm of high likelihood, is that as each property is assessed, you're going to get them going all over the place. Some are going to be, yeah, this looks right. Others might be, no, this looks high, etc. So I don't think there's going to be some sort of broad categorical, yeah, they're all right, they're all correct, or they're all wrong, or I think it's more likely to be something in the middle. But again, I'm speculating. And another thing I would say is, if I didn't already make it clear, and I think I'm saying nothing wrong here, is that if Phyllis mentioned a punch list, are they going to come with a punch list? I have no idea whether they're going to come with a punch list, but I would say, as an abatement filer, you come with your punch list, and you say, these are the things that I think are important factors when you take my case under consideration. I would advance every factor you think supports your case.
I got my punch list ready.
All right, thank you all. And if you have any additional questions, please email them to us. We are logging them, and we are working to answer them. So please email any other questions. Yeah, just come over here and ask it. Yeah.
Did we override Proposition 2.5?
No.
Okay, so is that based on the whole X, or is that individuals? Because you said all the houses went up 15%.
Correct. So the answer is, if everyone's values go up by 15% and the tax rate decreases by 15%, nobody gets a property increase.
Right, well, I'm saying this is like a backdoor thing where they're going to go after the lake people, then they'll go after the big houses to bring up the revenue 2.5% every year.
No. So the town itself the town budget can only grow by law by 2.5% unless we do an override. Our town has not done an override in many years to the budget. So no, what's being, and I think I mentioned this in a previous meeting, if all values were static and they never changed, your property taxes would go up by 2.5%, a little more than that a year. That's roughly what would happen. If everyone's values stay the same, we had no new growth, nothing ever changed, 2.5% is whatever we'd all get hit with. But what happens is, that's not how assessments work. Assessments are based on the current market value of your house. And so every year, we're figuring out whose homes are worth what. That's what the Board of Assessors does. And then based on those values, what we then know, it's kind of a reverse formula, that there's only so much money the town is allowed to levy. There's only so much we're allowed to go up. So that overall budget can only go up by 2.5%. That's all that happened. It's just the distribution, which is what the Board of Assessors does.
Yeah, I think, personally, I think they went on a blanket, like a CAD or whatever you call it, where they said you have 7,000 square feet. This is what we think you propose you could do with it. You could build a house, say that like Charlie built down the road.
Yeah.
Each property, as the woman said, has different problems, different roads, different easements, non-buildable land. I believe he just punched in square footage, 5,000 square feet. Okay, we sold one 5,000 square feet for 400,000. There's your value. So I think you'll find out in your investigation that's what happened. That's
All right.
my opinion.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I follow what you're saying.
Yeah, I think, I talked to a real estate expert from Quincy. He says your assessments are higher than our assessments. This is, you're not in Quincy, you're not in Quincy Bay. This will get overridden, so I have trust in you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your service.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate what you said.
Thank you.
All right. We lost Heather.
She stepped away to the bathroom.
Okay, I got a break too. Why don't we just take 3 minutes to the booth? Put us on mute. Let's take 3.
maybe. He couldn't hear us, so I don't know if he did that.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Just
Now he
confirm
can.
when we're unmuted on Zoom.
You are
I'll be able to see it, but not yet.
on Zoom too,
you're-
we're unmuted?
You're not unmuted on Zoom, so Zoom can't hear you.
Oh, he's doing,
There we
there
go.
we go. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I know you guys to switch the camera over here. So to those at home, we just took a, well, more than 3 minutes, but we took a couple-minute break following a previous discussion. All right. So the rest of our agenda is pretty light tonight. Usually when we don't have a member here, we go with a light agenda. Last week, there was discussion about Heather coming off of the school committee, so I wanted to have us have the opportunity tonight to review any committee assignments, to confirm if Ms. Roca is looking to actually come off, and to see if anyone's interested in
Confirm
coming.
that? Really? Are you just really asking that?
Yes, I'm asking a public meeting to confirm that you are.
I
looking
made
to
it a
come off.
public comment, and it was publicly said that I want to come off the school committee. And then I got an email from a public citizen that asked me when I was going to ask to be coming off of that committee because of things that they said at their meetings.
All right. So Heather is off of school committee
Yeah.
liaison. Is there anyone interested in picking that up?
Also want to point out, I am the only person with a child that goes to the school, so I do see things that you guys don't see from the school, so I can't always put my rosy-colored glasses on and give a happy report about what's going on over there. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You know, we've had a student initiative, and that has been very successful, working with the schools to do that. But as you know, I think the majority of the correspondence we receive from residents related to the school department are complaints.
Yep.
Which we are very much so aware of that. All right, so what I will do is I will reach out to the school committee and advise them that at this time, that we do not have a liaison assigned to them, and ask if they can assign a liaison to us.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. Let's go to current business. Discussion of annual town meeting warrant articles. So this was up here, there's no warrant articles for us to discuss. This is up here as a placeholder, and I want to kind of walk through why this is here. So every year, we propose different things for the warrant. If we're going to make proposals, we need to get on the front end of them, and we need to think about them kind of sooner than later. So last week, we had talked about whether or not we wanted to encourage the planning board to come up with some form of a prohibition against Airbnbs. The majority of the board was not in agreement with that. And so I want to have this as a placeholder until we get till the warrant closes, if there's any articles that we are thinking about, regulatory changes, that we have the opportunity to bring them up. So any thoughts for tonight, or is it just a placeholder, we can get to it next week?
I just want to, if I could put a.
Don't have a meeting next
2
week.
weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
I had gone before the sewer commission before the special town meeting in November, and at that, this goes back to May of last year. There was an issue I had with part of the language in that sewer commission bylaw, and I went before the sewer commission. They agreed in principle with the change I was proposing to make, but they suggested that it not go on the special town meeting warrant in November, so we punted it to this one. So I'm going to revisit that with the sewer commission, and so that's just a radar item that could be coming up. I mean, the proposal for the language is all mapped out, it's all there, and in principle, they agreed with it at the time, so that's all.
I think we need to vote to override the APDC's denial of changes to the Ritter building. So I know that we had talked about this at the special town meeting, and the feedback from the majority was that the complaint was not ripe.
So what is the process on that? How, they said it was
They
gonna.
denied us,
But they said it was gonna be speedy after that, after the town meeting. Didn't they tell us that it was gonna be speedy?
Yeah.
We have that on record, correct?
But they're waiting on us to resubmit a new CPI.
We have to resubmit a whole new one? No, that's not how they implied it. They implied that they were just gonna open it up and it would be speedy.
Correct.
Isn't that what they implied? That is what he said.
You are correct. And as you know, I was pretty
Mr.
vocally against.
Scalabrini, he's the one that said it, correct, Mr. Scalabrini? He's the one that said it would be speedy at that special town meeting.
So with now, what we.
Wait, and when was that? When was that meeting?
November the 10th.
Just curious.
15th.
Okay, so it's been 3 months almost. 90 extra days. Okay.
Heather, you know where I was on the front side of this.
I was
that
on the
I
same
thought we
side,
should have
like,
overrode them because
I did too, but town meeting voted no. Because they
we
were
encouraged no
misinformed.
as well. I mean,
They,
if we-
I don't know,
this
I didn't
actively
encourage, I didn't
encouraged no.
remember encouraging them to vote that way.
The majority of this, when I'm not talking crap, it's just the majority of our board felt as if we were being a bit premature. And
No, I
No,
think
it
it
was
was,
actually a minority.
I'm minority of this
It
board.
was,
was a minority?
it was Mr. Alonso and myself.
Yes, there were
All right,
not,
thank you, Tom, for the clarification.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there was a persuasive minority that felt as if we were being too premature.
I am,
Well, they made it sound like something bad was gonna happen if we did that.
And so now what we have to do is resubmit, which means
Mm-hmm.
not override their decision and do it again. And then based on the rules, that we have to wait from whenever they deny it, 3 months before we can go to town meeting. So if they deny this again, the earliest opportunity is next November.
So it'll have been a whole year,
Correct.
even though on record he said it was gonna be speedy.
Correct. So if we do not put this before the town this spring, then we have to go through the process again. Yes. And if they deny it again, then the next opportunity to get a yes is November.
And what's going on at that house right over there?
I have no idea.
Where they've totally taken it apart and
Vinyl
redone
siding.
it.
They have vinyl siding. on it.
historical
That's colonial vinyl siding.
Is it? Oh my gosh, there's such a thing.
They have vinyl siding, but we
I need
can't
to,
even
how
get
much money is
an
that?
energy efficient window.
Oh my gosh, this is.
But you can get vinyl siding, vinyl windows.
that, that had, I didn't know that for many years, but that had vinyl siding on it. Before this, yeah, it looked like wood. But when they started taking it down, it was vinyl.
I thought
So they
taking
were
part
essentially
vinyl, part
replacing in kind what they had.
Yes.
The windows too?
No, I don't know about that. Yeah.
The roof? They've done everything to that building.
Oh, yeah, no, I know they replaced the windows. I just, right.
Were they special historical window building windows or whatever they're supposed to be?
What's so, we have this whole new energy code too, which I know you probably know about more than anyone else, but we have this whole new energy code. And it's just like, yeah, but yet we can get energy efficient windows. I think we're preaching to the choir here. So, I mean, do we want to put on the warrant?
I think it's premature. Based on town meeting, having voted to resubmit the application, I think we just go through that process. And then when they deny us again, then we put it on the warrant.
So wait,
I'm
how long,
inclined to
if we,
disagree.
if we put it, if we like reapply, they have 90 days. So then we miss the whole window for this town meeting, right?
Correct.
Correct.
I mean, you can always put it on there and, see if people had a change of heart.
Right, so
I think we should do
reapply and
simultaneous.
like, what about reapplying and put it on the warrant?
So I think we can
Right.
appeal the denial of their
Right.
previous, and I think we can also apply.
And then put it on the warrant.
And
We could
based
do
on
all of
timelines,
those?
We'd have to submit it when is when is annual town meeting?
May 6th.
6th. So it needs to be in like yesterday, or they say they're not taking the full 90 days, so,
They told us it would be very speedy.
yeah. Okay, so maybe we should resubmit.
They also
and,
made it sound like we didn't have to resubmit.
Correct. You are correct.
Okay, they made it sound like,
They would just revisit it.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
and they haven't.
No, they've said that we need to resubmit.
So they basically it was
Bait and
not,
switch.
yeah, it was very inaccurate at that town meeting, what he had said to us. In his public comment, representing the board, quote, or maybe not representing the board, I don't know.
I'm with you. I've made many comments before that when I read the APDC bylaw and when I talk to the people who wrote it, such as Mr. Lockwood, such as Mr. McQuaid, that they did not certainly have the opinion, the same opinion. They have the same opinion that I have, which is that the town did not give 5 people appointed by the select board decision and authority over all town buildings. That they expect that they would make sure that there is some adherence to these design guidelines, but that we did not just say, okay, you 5 get to decide everything that happens on town buildings. And so when you have the majority of town meeting voting for an improvement on a building that is owned by the town, I mean, I don't think I could say anything new that I haven't said before, so let me just stop talking.
Oh, don't let that stop you.
Really? Come on.
It's already 9 something. All right. Let's put a placeholder override.
Plus, I think that's a rather meaty discussion.
When is the warrant articles due by again?
March
20th.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other articles we want to put placeholders on for now? Thoughts? All right.
Is it a Monday? What day of the week is March 20th? Is that I'm just curious.
It's Monday, I believe.
Monday?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It's a Friday.
It should be a Monday.
Should be a Monday. Based on the new calendar that we revised like a year ago.
Yeah, it's a Monday.
So, yeah, we made sure it would not fall on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
I'm just joking anyway.
All right. Any other discussion on annual town meeting warrant articles? Minutes for January the 10th. Are we ready to approve the minutes of January the 10th?
I do have and I only noticed this very late in the game, and I talked to Elaine, and she indicated that we could do like a floor amendment here, so, sorry, I think it was, so one minor amendment I want to make. There's a, what page was it on? I think it might have been on page 4, but they're not numbered, so hold on a minute. Sorry, maybe it's 5. So there was a...
Yeah.
It's during the discussions. Hold on a minute. Give me about another 30 seconds here. I'm sorry.
All right.
All right.
Any other? I think Elaine does a really good job.
Oh, yeah, no.
I know that she, because of my comments, she probably quotes me a little more often than previously.
Oh, all right. So, yeah, I only noticed, I mean, I would have just brought it up with her, like, if I had noticed it in time for her to actually change it, but it was way too late. It was literally like 6:03 when I talked to her, so.
All right, what page?
What page number is this?
It says it on the side, Lou, up on in the corner.
Yeah, 5, okay.
Page 5 of 9.
It's actually 4.
Page 4 of 9.
All right, about 3/4 of the way down, it said, Mr. Franco stated it is definitely not an immediate process. It is a prorated process. It's probably an autocorrect. It should have been, it's a protracted process. That's the exact word I used.
Okay.
But I think it's important to actually correct it because...
Prorated doesn't mean the same thing at all.
No. Right, no, I know. I don't know, it probably was an autocorrect or something like that, but it protracted. So, that's all. Other than that, I have no other issues.
Okay.
Well, I have other issues, just not related to the agenda.
Yeah. Any other comments on the minutes? All right. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of January 10th, 2023 with the noted correction from Selectman Franco.
I second that.
Any additional discussion? As many as are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion passes. All right, we do not have any warrants tonight. That means then that we will need to all come in here next week and sign.
What?
We're all going to need to come into the building next week.
Okay.
Before end of day on Wednesday
Okay.
and sign the warrants.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I'm gonna write that on my calendar.
Okay, any action items this evening? Committee reports. I was not able to attend the Municipal Building Design Committee meeting last night. I was having some technical difficulties on my side, which I'm not even gonna, it sounds
Well, if
kinda
they were live, Michael Ray, there would be no technical difficulties.
So it was very much so on my side. And they were live.
Were they?
They were lively through Zoom.
Yeah. If they were here, though.
In real time, Zoom and real. All right. Any other committee reports? Okay, we are going to go backwards in the agenda, so we're not quite done yet. We have a town manager report to the town manager.
All right. So it's a short report after last week's long report. Existing vacancies, there are 5 vacancies on the 300th Anniversary Committee, 1 vacancy on the Architectural Preservation,
No, we
remove
just
that.
filled that, right?
That was removed tonight. Council on Aging, there are 2 vacancies. Finance Committee, there's 1 vacancy. The Green Communities Committee, there's 1 associate vacancy, 2 vacancies on the Historical Commission, 1 member-at-large vacancy on the Open Space Committee, 1 vacancy on the Personnel Committee. Eric Arnold resigned from the Personnel Committee today.
The chair.
Due to, he has too many commitments
Okay.
outside of work. So we'll put together a thank you letter for him as well. And 1 associate vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Anyone interested in serving on any of these boards and committees can find the volunteer application on the website and fill them out and return them to the Select Board's office. And any questions on the roles and responsibilities can be requested. You can contact the Select Board's office at 582-4130, extension 144. For employment opportunities, there's currently the following employment opportunities: administrative assistant for IT, which is a part-time, non-benefited position; administrative assistant for the police, which is a part-time, non-benefited position; assistant town accountant, which is a part-time, benefited position; heavy equipment operator with the DPW, which is a full-time, benefited position; library assistants, which are part-time, non-benefited positions; tax collector principal clerk, which is a full-time, benefited position; production technician for public access, which is a part-time, benefited position; recreation director, which is a part-time, non-benefited position; seasonal lifeguards; and beach director, which is also seasonal; and public access videographer, which is a part-time, non-benefited position. And those job postings are found on the town website as well, under employment opportunities.
Heather, Mrs. Lemieux, for the, which I probably should start calling you officially town manager, Mrs. Lemieux, since I refer to everyone else as Mr. and Mrs. except for you. One of the questions I have is part-time, non-benefited. Is someone able to hold multiple part-time roles? So like if someone's sitting in one of these roles as, for example, a videographer, can they also apply to be a beach
Director.
maybe not beach director, but can they apply to be a library assistant?
The short answer is no. Due to a law where they have to be special municipal employees. So there are certain exemptions to that, which would have to be on a, have to look into the type of position it is.
Okay. Okay. So it has to be multiple different people.
Correct. There are exemptions to that, but yeah.
If I can make a suggestion, for some of the part-time roles, it may be helpful to identify the hours that's required for part-time. I'm sure in the job postings themselves they say it, but perhaps even in our meetings, because a part-time tax collector, may have more requirements to it than a part-time videographer. So that's it.
All of that information is on Indeed, Michael Ray.
It is on Indeed, but as we're, I'm trying to highlight the fact that if we don't get these positions filled pretty soon,
but
that's-
announcing it
it's got a
gives them
negative
the
impact.
ability to go on Indeed.
But maybe there's someone listening who doesn't
Oh.
use Indeed, but they're like, oh, only 10 hours? I'll sign up for that,
Through Indeed.
Or the town website.
Town website,
Right,
yeah.
when you have an Indeed
There's
account,
different
it's easier just to
media
click.
sources that the assistant town manager uses. Handshake is another one.
Oh, Handshake, yes, right? For the college students.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Heather. I know it. Mrs. Lemieux. Okay.
Well, yeah, because some part-time could be 30 hours, right?
Right.
Yep. Okay.
On to fiscal '23 budget updates. So there's been an identified projected deficit that we're going to see in the health insurance line this year due to changes in enrollment for both active and retiree employees. The finance director and I have identified accounts within the budget that there are projected surpluses that we can do end of the year transfers to cover this projected deficit.
Okay.
For FY23 snow and ice budget, we are currently over by approximately $170,000. This is largely due to the increases in rates for contractors, which we have to depend on more this year because 4 of our 7 trucks are out of service, as well as a significant increase in salt prices this year, over 12% from our primary vendor.
Bless you.
Bless you. Our finance director, DPW director and I met today to look at possible ways to cover this deficit, because obviously it's going to grow from now till the end of the snow season. And so, although not terrific for the pavement management plan, that was an identified source of funding that we could cover the deficit within the budget.
Yeah, we are in, I think I saw on the news that this is phasing up to be in the top 10 lowest snowfall records one year.
Don't say that out loud.
And so what's shocking is that in one of these, which may be a record year, that we're already, well over our snow budget. And I understand the reason why is we talked about it last week, that we've ordered these vehicles are in back order and they're going to take even more time to come in.
Yep. But there have been a lot of ice events and
Right.
snow.
It's different.
Short-term events, which actually are worse,
Yeah.
that I've heard from different
take
DPW
longer.
directors over the years, that they're a lot more time-consuming and expensive than, one large snowfall.
Okay, so a lot of the
So
the
like
freezing
January,
rain-
we had 7 snow events, or snow and ice events.
Little ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and usually we get the most in February.
What are you talking like
I
that?
do something. I just, so it's just true. February's the moneymaker.
All right.
Okay.
And invitation for bids, the 30 School Street hazardous materials demolition bids are due February 16th at 2 PM. Then the Town Hall building envelope project bids are due February 23rd at 10 AM. Unfortunately, we had a site visit on January 30th for the Town Hall building project, and we didn't have anyone attend that site visit. So,
Uh-oh.
right.
Well, you can get some bids that people don't show up to, but then they're going to be high.
Possibly. We did have people request the bid package, so we'll see what happens.
Was it real
on the
companies or
23rd.
was it like the?
No, real companies.
Okay. All right, so not the people.
Not just Project Dog or.
Yeah, Project Dog, they're the worst. All right. For us, they're the worst. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure for the consumer, on the other end of it, for the contractor.
Get it
probably
out
great.
there. And other meetings, events, and other announcements. The next public hearing for Pondview Commons is tomorrow night at 7 PM in this meeting room. And the annual town meeting warrant is open right now until March 20th, which is a Monday, until 4 PM. Articles can be submitted to the Select Board's office, and they have to be in writing. And the annual town meeting is Saturday, May 6th at the middle school, high school auditorium.
All right. Any questions for the town manager related to the town manager report? Seeing none, okay. Our upcoming meetings, events schedule. We are not meeting next week. I hope everyone has a wonderful Valentine's Day. And then we will be meeting on the 21st and the 28th. On the 28th, we're looking forward to the presentation from Mr. Franco and Mr. Alonso related to senior tax relief. And on the 21st, we will be discussing in more detail ARPA. Any public comments this evening from the town manager?
None.
Any public comments from the public? Seeing none in the room, do we have any on Zoom?
None.
We'll pause. Any public comments? All right, any public comments from the board?
So the 21st, you'll have another report, correct?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. It will be a written statement. We will not likely be able to take questions at that meeting, but it will be a written update, yes.
Okay.
We will be able to discuss it ourselves, but as far as public.
Right.
questions, yeah. Okay. Any other public comments from the board?
None.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any additional discussion? As many as are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, the time is now 9:36. The motion passes, and we are adjourned. To those at home, we hope you have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you with us here in 2 more weeks on the 21st, where we will be discussing ARPA funding and also providing a new update on the investigation that the Select Board is conducting. Have a good night.